Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Again, I'm Police Chief Eric Jones for the Stockton Police Department. And today's an opportunity for the two of us, the city manager and myself, to give Stocktonians in the regional area an update as to what's going on with crime. We've seen some unique things occurring, possibly related to the pandemic or what some criminologists believe is just societal anxiety. We'll get to that in a moment. But I first want to just talk about overall crime, and then I will talk specifically about homicide, because that is the one key area that we're seeing very sharp increases. So overall crime is down this year so far in Stockton compared to last year. And we push these statistics out monthly. We're a transparent organization. So actually through our public information office, whatever the statistics are, up, down, even, we always push that information out because the public has a right to know what is going on within their city. Property crime, which are things like theft, burglaries, vehicle theft, though that crime is also down. Even overall violent crime is down. In fact, non-fatal shootings are down this year compared to last year. And we're seeing national trends actually occur where that's not the case in a lot of major cities. Here I'm primarily going to talk about homicides though. And we have a very robust gun violence intervention prevention program. It's actually more of a program, it's just the way we do business, called Ceasefire. It's considered one of the most evidence-based practices, really one of the most proven gun violence deterrence and prevention and intervention work out there. We've customized it here for Stockton, primarily to work with, it's not just a police department thing, it is an all hands on deck, all cities department hands on deck. And we work hand in hand with the Office of Violence Prevention doing the Ceasefire work. We also use forecast-based deployment. We've had Operation Raven, which many of us discussed last year, which was reducing violence in our neighborhoods. So we have a very robust, tiered, collaborative approach with not just the Office of Violence Prevention, but also with a lot of our community-based organizations, nonprofits, clergy, because it is a community-wide problem where police aren't the only answer to it. And the reason I state these things on the front end is because we really do feel, had we not been doing a lot of this hard work with the collaboration between the Office of Violence Prevention and the police department, who knows what our numbers would be. We do know, based on both data and anecdotal stories, that we likely prevented a lot of gun violence this year so far. So let's go ahead and get into the numbers because we're seeing news stories again across the country. There was a Police Executive Research Forum report recently put out, which actually highlighted all of the major cities, large cities across the country. Virtually all of them are up in major ways, very, very sharp increases with both shootings and homicides. So for us, we've had 49 homicides this year to date, compared to 32 that we had last year at this time. Now, what does that mean? That means we're up significantly from last year. But if we look at the last 3-year average, we average about 35 homicides per year over the last 3 years, but we've been in the 50s, even the 70s in prior years. Now, when I say numbers, we all recognize we need to talk about numbers of homicides and categories of homicides because we need to examine trends, which can then assist us as a city on developing strategies to address the types of homicides we're seeing. But I know we all realize they're not just a number. There's a victim behind each and every one of them. There's a story behind each and every one of them. And so our hearts go out to all of the homicide victims, not just this year, but in all years prior in Stockton. So if we look at this year's homicides, we're seeing some unique differences from years prior. Most sharp on the increase is domestic related. So this includes child abuse, domestic violence, or some other domestic relationship type of homicide. Normally, we may have 1 or 2 such homicides a year in our city. This year, 15 of our homicides are domestic related. And this is one reason we're working so strongly and collaboratively with our Family Resource and Family Justice Center, with the District Attorney's Office, participating in the Domestic Violence Task Force, working with a lot of the nonprofits and organizations throughout the city to reduce that type of violence. And I think a big part of it needs to be education and for individuals knowing that they have a place to go and there are folks out there to help them in domestic issues. We've also seen an increase in another unique category, which is homicides either at or adjacent very near to a homeless encampment. Now, I'm in no way saying that homeless encampments are violent. I'm in no way saying that homeless population are violent. We've just seen at some particular homeless encampments, a criminal enterprise situation may have sort of saturated into the area, and that may have something to do with some of the homicides there. As far as group homicides or gang-related homicides, this year to date, we've had 9. So of the 49, 9 have been specifically tied to gang-related homicides. Normally, those types of homicides are about 75% of our total number. 7 of this year's homicides have been robbery or narcotics related. And then we have a category of 12 that are within either other or unknown. But those are the primary categories. We're analyzing each. We have strategies for each category of homicide. As I mentioned, any homicide is one too many. But we have to analyze the numbers, analyze the data, look at the trends so we can have strategies to continue the work. And I really want to thank the very hard work of our detectives, work of our other agencies that we work with. They're not just working current cases or working cold cases. They're working other cases that happened earlier this year, such as the tragic homicide that occurred at our mall. And just yesterday, detectives are putting out information to ask for help on who provided the homicide suspects the firearm that was used. So they're working 24/7, and we know the community deserves it, and we know the community deserves not just the hard work of our detectives, but the transparency of their city government and their city police department. And I want to end by, we have a fairly high, compared to a national average, clearance rate, which is a little over 70%. What's a clearance rate? That means it's a solved case that's able to be closed in homicides. The national average is around 60%. So that, again, shows not just the diligent, hard work of our detectives, but also the community coming forward and helping us. Community can't do it alone. The police department can't do it alone. We have to come together and work together. And based on tips, individuals coming forward, and we still want our community members to do that because they're helping us solve these cases. And they can help us reduce our homicide numbers and our violence over time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the city manager. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chief. So at this time, we'll be delighted to take any questions that you might have.
Well, I'd like to ask the chief a question, Chief, if that's all right. You mentioned the homeless encampments, and there's a saturation of some sort of criminal enterprise. What kind of enterprise are you referring to that's going on?
What we have noticed is currently we're not able to just address homeless encampments in the way we've been able to before because of the pandemic and public health instructions, meaning displacement can further impact the spread of the virus. However, what we've noticed is some of those encampments left sort of unchecked over a long period of time may have a tendency for narcotics dealing, prostitution, other types of things to take root there. And that's unfortunate for not just the community members around that area, but also those other homeless populations that are there too, that are put in this situation. We've noticed that some of those types of crimes have led to disturbances or disagreements that have then led to homicides.
I noticed, and I didn't close enough, but on Lincoln Street, as we were coming over here, it looked like there was an encampment that was being cleared out with some heavy equipment. So is that part of the strategy, is to start clearing these out and making sure that these don't continue to take root?
In some cases, we are, because we have to weigh the other public safety issues. That could be a serious fire safety hazard. That could be an infrastructure issue that's significant and that needs to be addressed. Or it could be a significant public safety hazard, which could be crime, robberies, violent crime. It could be a number of those. And then also if there's private property, sometimes we were able to address that differently than we are with public spaces. Do you have anything else to add on that, sir?
Now, the Chief, you explained that pretty thoroughly. Again, with the pandemic and with the overall public health strategy in terms of helping to mitigate the risk and the damage. You know, typically prior to the pandemic, there was more mobility there. So now when you settle in for long periods of time, it's like anything. It's like being at home with your family or being in a community that's just settled in. You know, things sort of, the dynamic sort of changes. But as the chief mentioned, we're very, very sensitive to that. We're sensitive to, number one, always optimizing, balancing public safety, infrastructure safety, but also with the rights and the well-being of the homeless at the same time.
Hey, Chief, the mayor-elect says more cops on the street. Is that what you're asking for, or are you happy with your staffing levels, or do you think that will make a difference?
Well, we all know that the city of Stockton was extremely understaffed post-bankruptcy, right after bankruptcy. Based on a tax measure, we were able to restore the police department's numbers to pre-bankruptcy numbers. I've always stated it's, you know, what I'd love to have 600 police officers because that's sort of the national average, of course, but it's not about the number of police officers, it's how we're using them. And we have to balance that with the budget and the long-range financial plan. Currently, I am very pleased with the number of officers I have and the caliber of the officers I have and the work that they're doing.
How many officers do you have now?
485 is our authorized strength.
And you said that at this time last year, you had 32 on assignment. Was that the final total for the year as well?
The final total was 34 at the end of 2019.
I just want to piggyback on the last question. This, you know, one of the things that of many things that I've learned to appreciate about our police chief is that one. It's an example that I share with him all the time. I won't say what previous city, you know, that I've worked in, 20,000 fewer residents, more than twice the number of police officers, but my crime stats in Stockton are 50% less in that particular city. So it testifies to the fact of what the chief said. Numbers are one thing, but it's what do you do with what you have? Secondly, it's also important to keep in mind that Stockton has done a fantastic job. And I can say that still being relatively new, coming from the outside, Stockton has done a phenomenal job in terms of how it approached this financial crisis, how it continues to approach, you know, rebounding from that financial crisis. And we don't want to do anything to reverse the progress that the city has made. So any investment that we make in assets or people, we have to keep that in mind. We have to do what we can afford to do and not put the city in a bankruptcy at-risk mode.
And Chief, just like you said, you guys need help solving these cases. People need to come forward. If someone is afraid to say something or they saw something, what can they do? What sources are offered for them?
Yes, thank you for asking that because it's important for our community to know they can report things anonymously. And that's the purpose of our award-winning, one of the first Crime Stoppers programs on the West Coast. They do such a great job. They pay out rewards, and we can confirm anonymity when individuals call in. So I do recognize in some cases, you know, there's a fear. And so we want the community to know we're here to protect you, to work with you, to make you feel safe. And if you really need to remain anonymous, that is absolutely an option here in Stockton.
And you also mentioned some of these cases are domestic related. What sources are offered for the families of these victims?
We have, we work closely with our district attorney's office, the Victim Witness Program. We work with the Women's Center, the Family Resource Center, and so many more. I mean, there really are a lot of California Partnership for Safe Communities, the San Joaquin County Partnership for Families. I can go on and on. And so there are a lot of resources. We just want our community members to know this 2020 has been difficult on all of us, and especially for domestic issues. And so we want everyone to know that the resources are available out there, and they're first responders too. They're essential workers. They're still doing the work, and they can still help.
What is the time frame on the 70% solving rate? Is it this year, or 2 years, 5 years?
That's currently, that's this year.
Okay.
So to date, out of those 49 homicides, it's a 70.6% clearance rate or solve rate.
I was talking to a community organization, Advanced Peace, and they said there's been an uptick in the last few months, and actually Stockton had been off of the trend that's been nationwide with other cities that have been happening all year. Why has it picked up in the last few months, do you think?
Yes, so we have noticed that of the gang violence or what we call the group violence, because sometimes they may refer to themselves as a crew or clique or some other thing. But it's when a group is using violence, perhaps out of retaliation on with another group. We have noticed a couple of recent conflicts that have emerged. And so what occurs is occasionally some conflicts will emerge for a number of reasons between some groups or gangs. And that's where we, Office of Violence Prevention, or other outreach workers, we have a lot of organizations that have outreach workers working, doing the groundwork. That's when we all have to come together, roll up our sleeves, and really be swift on potential intervention. You know, some very important components of dealing with violence, especially homicides, is prevention, intervention, and suppression, which is enforcement. And so, you know, those outreach workers out there are doing the prevention work or the intervention right on the streets, and then we work with the enforcement side, and then together, running these parallel tracks, we're really hoping to deal with these conflicts. Okay. Any closing for you, sir?
Other than that's it for questions, just gonna say thank you and that just for the public to know that your city government, through the police department and our partners, we're doing everything that we can to always ensure that we're optimizing the safest city